Good morning. I want to personally welcome you to the Lead Developer Conference. I'm really excited about a conference like this because when I think about my own journey as a tech lead, there was nothing like this to help me into that role. And I think one of the things that I wanted to sort of share with you as part of this talk are some of the things that I've learned sort of moving into this role and talking to many other tech leads about their experiences moving into this role and some of the challenges and lessons that they've learned along the way. There are a few books out there, and there are more and more, and this is a really positive thing for our industry. But I think there's always something to learn from other people with experience. So I've worked with ThoughtWorks for 12 years, and this meant that I've led quite a lot of different technical teams. We're a software consultancy who help clients build better software, and we try to have a positive impact on the industry, such as sharing ideas about our continuous delivery, lean enterprise, and our tech radar, which you can find out more about. Our luminaries are Jim Highsmith and Martin Fowler, and we're happy to talk more about this at our stand later today. Personally, my interest is actually in building new sort of technical leaders. And in this, I've actually sort of published a couple of books, one which I'm very passionate about learning, and hence about retrospectives. But the other one is about talking with tech leads, which is a collection of interviews with about 35 different people in different stages. We'll be giving away 5 copies of this at our stand, so come through, have a chat to us, and we'll happy to talk more about this. However, let's now talk about our time together. We're going to be going on to a journey, and we're going to be having a look at 3 different phases about perhaps what some of you might have about to be starting on, or some of you have been through and are still continuing on. We'll briefly look at what life is like before becoming a tech lead. Maybe some of you are still developers, looking at being a lead developer and what it means to play this role. We'll maybe look at the shock and the experiences of being the first-time tech lead. It's quite interesting because I think this is one of the most difficult sort of transition phases for anyone first taking on a leadership role. And then we'll have a look at what a seasoned tech lead might have learned through over time. So first, life as a developer. I still clearly remember my first time before I was a tech lead. My life was very much about sort of the terminal, maybe you recognize this, the place of where I'd actually be working. And it'd be about the code and the things that I'd actually be producing. And so the way that I actually measured the value that I had was through the code that I wrote, through the features and systems that I built. And I was really excited about delivering features. I think I was kind of lucky enough to be involved, I guess, in one of the early sort of agile projects very early on in my career. And I got a lot of kick out of actually delivering functionality for the clients and seeing my software being used. I think there's nothing more sort of disturbing than sort of seeing your software go to waste and being put on a shelf. And the interesting thing about this phase as being a developer is that you kind of get really fast feedback about whether or not things are working. We get sort of, to know whether or not things are broken immediately. Maybe our tests are broken. Maybe we get sort of monitoring failures in production, or we get sort of bug reports from users. And in these days, okay, there are sometimes some challenges. We need to look at Stack Overflow. We need to go onto the internet. We need to talk to colleagues and think about these problems. But these problems get solved relatively easy. We can kind of think about the feedback cycle in terms of minutes, hours, maybe days. And we get this sense of accomplishment that things are getting better and things are moving on. And over time, I guess one of the things as a developer is that you look at sort of wanting to solve more problems, bigger problems, more interesting challenges. You sort of build one system, you get really excited about that, you want to build a better system. And maybe you want to actually have a bit more of an impact. And for me, it was really interesting because I think I started to think in terms of building systems and not just the software which I'd be actually writing. For me, my transition to being a tech lead was quite interesting. As I was coming back from a weekend abroad in Europe somewhere, I got a call from our staffing sort of group at some point, and I was still at the airport. I get this telephone call telling me, I'm actually not going to go back to the team that I was working on as a developer. Instead, I'd be going back to a new team where I'd be acting as a tech lead. Exciting times. But then I started to think, what does this actually mean? What exactly is a tech lead? How do I know if I'm going to be a good tech lead? What does a tech lead do? I've only been a developer all my time, and yes, I've worked with tech leads, but I was really focused on the code that I wrote and the features that I built, rather than actually watching what the tech lead actually does. It's interesting because we work with probably tech leads all the time, but we probably don't actually observe what they're actually doing. And so for me, this was the whole transition from moving from being a developer to a first-time tech lead. And this was kind of scary. As a developer, I felt like over time, I knew what the path was, that it was well sort of trodden. I knew I'd learnt a lot, and I knew that there was even more to learn. The areas in which I had sort of focused on, I knew that there was lots of books about, other conferences where I could learn about these ideas. But this tech lead thing, it was fuzzy, it was unknown. I didn't really know what I should be focusing on. I didn't know where I should sort of look to get advice. And I didn't even know if I was going to be doing a good job. I felt like an imposter. So it's a good thing that there's a talk tomorrow about imposter syndrome. And the thing that I've learned over time, looking at this, is that, and it's a bit cliche, I know, but life as my first time tech lead was a real emotional roller coaster. There were days where I felt really good about myself, where I felt that would make some progress, but there were other days where I just didn't know what to do. I didn't know if I was making the right choices. I didn't know if I was saying the right things. And, I think I made a lot of mistakes, and I apologize to my teams, but I hope that they've also had a good time as part of it. Looking back also at the teams that I'd worked on before becoming a tech lead, I realized that many of the tech leads I worked with had also made mistakes. I managed to live through them, but I also vowed never to make the same mistakes that they had had, and thus hopefully had a much more positive impact on the team that I had. And the thing is about being a tech lead is that you get to make mistakes, but you only get to make some number of mistakes. I guess one of the things that you sort of learn as a tech lead is that your impact is amplified. No longer is it just the code that you're writing or the systems that you build that are affected if things go bad, but actually it's the whole team and the environment in which you work. I think one of the sort of first mistakes, and it's the easy trap to fall into, is this idea about writing code all the time. As a developer, you do this most of the time throughout the day. You're comfortable writing code. And as a first-time tech lead, it will be your safe haven. You need your little quiet space where you feel safe to do something and feel accomplishment. And writing code is often this outlet. You have to be very careful, though, you don't fall into this trap of writing code and leaving all the other responsibilities behind, because that's one of the responsibilities of being a lead dev. You need to look beyond the code that you're actually writing. Now, it's quite often in my experience talking to many tech leads that people who make this sort of leave developer transition is that you're probably one of the more senior developers or one of the considered best developers. And the temptation here is that as a tech lead, that you might want to make all the technical decisions. And this is where you need to be really careful. You don't really want to sort of take all the really hard decisions on, because you probably won't have all the information that your development team will have. More to that, you need to think about the impact that you're having with the team that you're actually working with. If you take on all the interesting challenges, then what is left for everyone else? Everyone else should have some interesting problems to solve as well. I worked with one tech lead very early on in my experience, and that was kind of a traumatizing one. We would write code, and then overnight they would come in and refactor everything that we'd written. You laugh, but imagine this after 2 weeks of you as a developer, all the code you write being rewritten. You kind of get a sense that actually the thing that I'm developing isn't worth it anymore. And so maybe you start to lose motivation. Maybe you start to lose interest. And as lead devs, we need to be aware of our own actions and the impact it has on others and what we communicate and their value. One of the next traps you need to think about is being aware that people isn't somebody else's problem. When you work on a team, everyone will go through a bad day. Everyone will maybe have a sleepless night. Things will be going on outside of their team. And as a developer, you kind of get to ignore that. You don't have to solve that problem. But as a tech lead or a lead dev, you need to worry about this. You want to be aware about the mood of your team and make sure that you're aware about how that maybe starts to spread. If somebody comes in really angry and negative, imagine what impact that's having on other people around you. You don't necessarily, you probably don't need to solve that problem, but you probably need to be an emotional outlet for them and help them through that. You need to take care of some of these people problems. And I guess one of the things that first-time tech leads go through is this fear of wanting to maybe assert their own sort of opinions. This fear of maybe wanting to stamp authority on things. And there's a gentle balance here to have. But there's two extremes, and one of the worst extremes is actually not to do anything about it. To assume that the team knows which direction people are going in. And this is where I see teams start to pull apart in different directions. You'll have some developers think, oh, this is the time that we get to play with new technology or tools like React. Or maybe it's our time to sort of solve all this technical debt that we've been sort of building up over time. Other people will be sort of churning out features. And our responsibility is to make sure that everyone's aligned rather than sort of pulling in different directions. And I guess this is where, we also need to worry about how we resolve arguments within the team. Our typical tabs versus spaces, fights. We need to be able to actually help the team come to a consensus. And I kid you not, I've been on many teams where you'll have some developers check out code, automatically format to their preferred thing, and check it back in. Imagine this going back and forth all the time, and how much time that's wasting when they can solve more interesting problems with this energy. So yes, we can make mistakes, but we need to be careful about how many we make and what that actually means. And so this brings us on, I guess, to our sort of longer part about what is it that a more experienced tech lead knows about after doing it for many times. I think the really interesting thing for me, having interviewed lots of different tech leads in this sort of role, is that transition from being a first-time tech lead to a more experienced one is a little bit easier than it is being a developer to being a lead dev for the first time. As a lead dev, you've probably focused a lot more on your sort of technical skills, but not really focused on all the other things that it will take time to build, but are just as important, such as people and leadership skills. So let's have a look at what a wiser tech lead does. The first thing is being comfortable that things will no longer be binary. So as a developer, we'll be very comfortable that our code will work or it doesn't work. We'll be very comfortable understanding whether our system actually is functioning or things aren't functioning. People will report errors and we'll work out if they're actually right or not. Your feedback as this developer comes really fast. It comes in terms of these seconds and minutes or hours, rather than thinking about days or weeks potentially about people and the sort of systems. And the thing is, as we sort of make actions, we decide on things to do as a lead dev, sometimes we're never really right if they're the right actions. And this is where things get really fuzzy. It can be weeks until the consequences of what we do actually has some impact. And we're never really sure if it's still the right thing to do. Things get really hazy around, did I communicate enough to the team about where we're heading? Does everyone understand the end architecture of what we're actually building? Are we moving in the right direction, or are we taking on too much debt? These are not easy answers to suddenly say yes or no. These things change over time, and they'll never ever be precise. We'll get a sense of them, but we need to actually understand that this is a natural state of things. We'll never really get that right answer about whether or not things are perfect right now. In a complex system such as involved with teams and organizations, these effects of when we decide to act on things take a lot longer to manifest. And a trap that we can fall into is acting too rapidly. And this is where maybe a system will sort of cycle back and forth. And often it's sometimes better to actually sort of wait and observe and monitor a system before we decide to act, to work out whether or not we're actually heading in the wrong direction or not. So monitor and look for feedback loops in this world of being hazy. We'll never really know if we're making the right things, but maybe we get a sense of we're heading in the right direction, and that's okay. I think one of the first things that you'll sort of be expected to answer from lots of people as a lead dev is having all the right answers. As maybe one of the best developers, people probably look to you originally to sort of answer all these questions about does this or is this function working, or is this capability easy to do? You don't need to have all the answers, and this is okay. You have a whole team to back you up. The important thing is that you tap into the team and you work out how people can actually contribute to this. Business people will ask you, is this the best way of doing things? Or, when can we get this new sort of functionality built? And developers will look to you to perhaps ask, is this the right architecture or tool that we should be using? And you don't always have to sort of have an answer. It's okay to sort of say, I don't know, but let's find somebody or ask somebody who does. Let's take some time out to actually discover what might be the right answer, because we don't know. The side effect to this is that you expose a little bit of vulnerability as well. And vulnerability gives you a really strong place of being a leader. It shows that you're never perfect. We can never be perfect, but we can actually help other people grow and learn as well. Remember that we aren't defined by the code that we write or the things that we built. And as a result, we don't have to have all the answers, and that's okay. Third point here is thinking about that you won't be liked by everyone. And this is okay. The interesting thing about this role is that you won't make everybody happy. And it's one of the sort of consequences of leading any group. There's a really interesting fable from Aesop which is about the man, the boy, and the donkey. In this, the man and the boy are walking a donkey to the market to sell. As they walked by its side, a countryman kind of passes them and says, "You fools, what is a donkey for but to ride upon?" So the man put the boy on the donkey, and on they went. Soon they passed another group of men, one of whom who said, "See that lazy youngster, he lets his father walk while he rides." Upset, the boy got off, and the man got on the donkey himself. And they hadn't passed too far when they crossed two other women. And they said to him, "Shame on that lazy lout to let his poor little son trudge along." Confused, the man decided to then pick up the boy and put it on the donkey. They soon reached the town, and many people started to laugh and jeer at them. The man stopped and asked what they were scoffing at, and they said, "Aren't you ashamed for yourself for overloading this poor donkey, with you and your hulking son?" They both got off and weren't quite sure what to do, and they thought, and they decided to actually pick up the donkey, tie his legs together, and tie him to a pole and carry him over the shoulder. They finally reached the market, but then everyone was starting to laugh and wonder what was going on. And in this ruckus, the donkey kind of kicked and kind of slipped off, but then fell into a river and drowned. It's a bit of a depressing tale, I know. But the consequences of this fable is that if you want to please all, you will please none. And that's the big lesson here, is that as a leader, your role is not to be liked by everyone. You need to make sure that you're trying to keep everyone as much happy as you can, but you also need to be understanding that you won't make everyone happy with the actions that you take. And this brings on to feeling this role of loneliness. So as a developer, you're often surrounded by other developers. Maybe you work in a sort of environment where you pair program and work very closely with people. And that's a really exciting environment because when you have problems, you get to bounce things off with other people. But when you become this sort of lead developer, you often end up in this role where you feel like a slight outsider. Somebody in your team might come talk to you and talk to you about something that's quite personal. You can't really share that with the rest of the team, and you're not really sure what to do with that. And so you're thinking about taking on these problems by yourself, but you're not really sure about how you deal with that. The good thing is that there are probably other development teams around you where there are other people in similar positions, maybe not in the same context, but people who share the same concerns and problems that you might have. And you can probably get together and maybe talk about these things in maybe a sort of anonymous fashion or a safe fashion where you can talk about these things openly. And the good thing is about people who work in sort of larger companies is that you won't be the only development teams with the only lead developers out there. You'll probably have more people around you as well. And the good thing about a conference like this is that there's a whole bunch of you here that can probably support you as well. So think about building maybe a tech council within your own organization. Establish your own sort of community of practice around lead developers and build your own support network. It's really important that you don't need to work out all these problems by yourself, and find your own coach and your own mirror to bounce these problems off. You don't need to be alone. As I mentioned before, non-technical areas are just as important. And the thing is, as a developer, you'll probably have spent a lot more time thinking about code, design, architecture, working out how to write clean code. And this kind of circle of skills is really easy, and we can kind of spend more time developing that. Maybe we've sort of thought a little bit more around sort of architecture, but we maybe need to think about building systems and getting more awareness about operational concerns or production concerns. But the circle that often takes the longest is the circle of leadership skills. The great thing about this circle is that there's a lot of different books and resources out there. There's lots of different training for different types of things out there. If you want to get better at influencing, persuasion, if you want to get better at conflict resolution, or setting a vision and communicating, there's a lot more resources out there, but it takes a lot longer to develop. You get less instant gratification from maybe solving some of these things because you don't get that sort of binary yes-no things worked problem. But these areas are just as important to develop. So when you think about your own sort of personal experiences developing, think about where you invest your time and make sure it feels balanced in each of these 3 different circles. One of the important things that I've learned, I guess, about leadership and learning more about leadership is really understanding that people are really complex. I think when you start thinking about the teams that you're working on, one of the easy things to do is start thinking in terms of the sort of team members that you have, and sort of thinking, oh yeah, I have a group of sort of developers or testers or different people. And we start to think about them as sort of a collective group. Rather than thinking of them as sort of a group of numbers, we really want to be thinking about each person individually, and that each person is a bit more like a snowflake. Each person has their own strengths and weaknesses, their own interests, their own background about where they come from, about what they've gone on as part of their journey, and where they're heading to and what they want to actually do. And the biggest thing that I've learned about being a lead dev is actually thinking about how you tap into this. How do you find out about these things and find their interests, about where their passions are, and how you use them to sort of help the group along as well. And this takes time. You need to have conversations with people, spend some time with each person, and learn to and find out what their interests are, learn their strengths and backgrounds. And there won't be a single recipe that works for everyone. When you're thinking about communication, some people will prefer emails, some people will prefer being talked to. Everyone will have their own sort of mix, and there'll never be a sort of right mixture around them. But the important thing is that you're spending time trying to really understand what each snowflake is like and how you sort of develop that. More importantly, it's actually probably good for you also to get some feedback from those people as well, create a feedback culture, and work out if you're actually doing the right things for each person on the team. Which brings us on to the not doing everything yourself. So everyone will have these different styles about what they'd like to do. And time management will probably be one of your most critical skills to actually develop. As one of maybe the best developers, you might have felt this pressure that I need to keep sort of getting involved in all the hard places and try to get involved and take action. I need respect from the team, so I need to be seen writing code, and I need to do all these other things, but you have many other responsibilities to take care of as well. So you can't do everything yourself. One of my favorite tools around this to draw upon is the idea of the situational leadership model. And this is the idea that there are different ways of acting like a leader depending on what skill and sort of background people have and what things need to actually happen. So there's no one leadership mode that works for everyone. It looks a little bit like this. So we have sort of supporting behavior and sort of directing behavior. And we have kind of 4 different actions that we might be able to take with the sort of team that we're actually working with. We can sort of maybe tell people what to do. Maybe we need to actually sell them the task at hand. Or maybe we need to actually get involved in the problem solving with them, or just purely delegate. And depending on the sort of point in time of where people are, you need to take different actions around this. So as a really good example is when we work with graduates, we bring them in, you generally have this huge enthusiasm that comes from people fresh from university. They want to change the world, they want to learn, and they have this enthusiasm, motivation that maybe more experienced people have lost along the way. And the thing that they're lacking is really about the knowledge and know-how. And so actually they're willing to be told what to do to a certain degree about being a little bit more prescriptive and giving them a bit more assistance about the task at hand. Whereas if you try to act this way with maybe more experienced people, it'll be really frustrating for them, right? Because they'll have their experiences and say, actually, I'm an independent person, I know how to do this. You don't need to tell me what to do. At the same time, even experienced people will have new places where they need to be told what to do as well. So as an example, I was talking earlier before is that I've never done React. And if somebody gave me a React project, I'd be quite happy for somebody to tell me, here are the steps that I need to go through to actually set up the React framework, and these are the sort of places where I need to go through. So even somebody who is seasoned, if they have a new skill, being told what to do can help them along the way. And the key with this kind of sort of situational leadership framework is thinking about how you progress people through these different phases. So as you develop somebody's skill in a certain area, you need to move away from sort of telling them what to do to maybe helping them understand why it's important, and then moving into sort of participating with them. And we ideally want to get to the point, which is why this graph is a little bit backwards, to the point where we can sort of delegate things. So we expand the bandwidth that we can create. So we provide less sort of supporting behavior, or less directing behavior, and we support them in what they actually need to do. And this brings us on, I guess, onto leadership styles. And this is one of my favorite sort of talks about everyone has their own different styles, and there are many ways of being a leader. It's okay that you as a lead dev will be different about how somebody else approaches their problems. Everyone has their own unique strengths, as I mentioned. And you need to probably spend some time identifying how you approach things differently and your own personal strengths as well. I'll describe some of the, I guess, common patterns of which I see leaders acting out differently. The first one is kind of taking a coaching stance, where good lead devs won't give people the answer straight away. Instead of sort of telling people the answers, we're asking questions to help people maybe connect the dots. So if we think about Socratic thinking and asking questions to lead people maybe to the answers, they'll learn a lot more than simply being told. They'll go on their own path of discovery and grow as a result. Sometimes people need shepherding. So you'll have some people who maybe don't know what to do, but that you know that they have the skill. And coaching is maybe not the best way of actually bringing them out. You might need to help them along the path. So you might need to sort of lay a few markers to help them come up with the sort of solution themselves, or maybe the motivation around that as well. And this is where you need to sort of channel your inner shaman, perhaps. There are some people that are much, much better at this than others, but it's worth sort of building up your storytelling ability. When you think about when new developers join your team and they talk about why is this system like this and who put this framework in and why do we have all this technical debt, it helps to sort of build the story around where it comes from, that there were constraints in the environment in which you worked in and what we actually delivered. This is channeling your inner shaman and helping people understand why things are the way they are and the way that things got to today. It doesn't mean you can't change it, but it at least helps you understand and appreciate where things are because of the way things got to. The final stance is thinking about really acting as a champion. So sometimes we need to give our team space. We need to protect them from perhaps pressures from external environments, and business people are perhaps coming in all the time and interrupting people all the time. We need to actually create some space for that team. Sometimes being a champion means that we need to sort of rally the troops and get them moving in the same direction. Particularly if there's sort of critical times around maybe a production issue. We need to get everyone focused on solving that problem rather than perhaps arguing about maybe how you might solve that. And there are many, many more stances that we can take as lead devs. The important thing is that we understand and appreciate which are the ones that we feel most strongly with and that we have the best skills in. One of the secret things about being a lead dev is something that I see a lot of people never really tap into. And the secret power is being able to say no. The biggest thing that will win you time is by saying, no, we won't do this. It doesn't mean that you have to say no all the time, but in the sort of pleasure to sort of appease everyone, a lead dev will often take on too much and become overburdened with all the tasks that they actually need to do. And so the biggest way that you can sort of manage this is actually by sort of telling people, maybe I don't have the time right now, or the team doesn't have the time right now. So manage your own time and your own team commitments. And it's okay to say no, because you need to know about what your team is actually good at. Focus on where you add the most value, rather than on the things that you could potentially do. Don't focus on the urgent and non-important things. Make sure that you create time to actually spend time on the important but never urgent things. And the only way that you can do this is actually by saying no. Now, there's lots of different things, and maybe this is traumatizing for people who are developers and not yet lead devs, but a real important lesson about why you might want to be a lead dev is thinking about this greater impact. So I shared my own personal story about moving on from wanting to write smaller features to systems to wanting to have more impact. And the empowering thing about this role is that instead of thinking about this sort of myth of the 10 times developer, is that if we actually focus on creating a more productive environment for the team in which we're working on, if we make everybody on that team just that little bit more productive, we can actually give everyone a little bit of a power up and be that 10 times developer through the team that we're actually working with. We've looked at what life was like before being a tech lead. We looked at the worries and the experience of maybe the first time tech lead and the lessons learned through the more experienced and wiser tech lead. And now we've been on this journey, I'd like to reveal one final tip. And that is, the journey never ends. Hunger for knowledge and continue to learn, and you'll continue developing yourself as a tech lead and have greater impact in the process. Thank you once again.